if your timing of the bottom of the pedal stroke at 6 o'clock point is off, you're losing some efficiency there. So that's my spiel on cops.
No, it makes a
I love
sense.
cops. Don't get me wrong.
Bad boy, bad boy.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Being slouches with
Stitch.
a big slouch.
The
biggest slouch of them all.
Yeah, the biggest
Holding
slouch.
down the middle cushion here.
I am Coach Dale Sanford.
I am Coach Bryant Funston.
We are co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system that has been developed the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from fresh off the couch to the world championship competitor. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at Build Peak Compete, and Instagram at BPC Performance.
Bam.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
I mean, that's probably the best one yet.
I think it was. I mean, we could just like build that as part of the intro, and then you wouldn't have to read it every time.
We could actually like
have it an
cut
extra.
to it. We might just
cut
have to do that as a video and cut to it, so I don't have to say it every time.
I don't know. You're getting better and better, though.
I'm pretty good at it. Little business here before we get going.
Great topic. By
Hot
the way.
topic today.
Hot topic.
Hot
Something
topic.
We talked a lot about bike fit
We're talking
issues
yeah.
and bike fitting in general.
Yeah, most common bike fitting issues that we see. We fit a lot of bikes. Or I fit a lot of bikes, and
Over 250 now. We were just tallying.
well, those are the ones that we have
that you have
data on. There was a time early on that I did not collect data on the bikes I was fitting. Probably a bad idea. And I've overridden a lot of data on people who've like brought new bikes in. They don't own the bike anymore. So it's probably maybe 300 or so bikes over the last 10 years. Increasingly more.
Yep.
But we have a giveaway.
Yes. Who doesn't love a good giveaway?
We have another giveaway. We've got a free entry into the Heatwave Triathlon. That is June 1st, 2019.
Guaranteed to be cool.
In case you're listening to this
Guaranteed
in
to
the
be
future.
cool temperatures.
Yep.
Perfect race conditions.
It's not been bad in the last couple of years.
Excellent.
But it is a half-mile swim. This is the best part. 27-mile bike. Yeah, it's pretty
Damn.
flat and
You
fast.
cyclist, man.
27-mile bike and a 10K run. The
Nice.
run's kind of challenging toward the end.
Uh-huh.
The bike has a couple of rollers on it, but otherwise it's pretty dang fast.
On Natchez Trace, correct?
It's on the Natchez Trace, and you generally
I've
have
ridden that before. That's a great place to ride.
Yeah, it's in Ridgeland, Mississippi. So if it's a couple hours from here, from Memphis, but great race. So here's how you get entries. 1, you share this live event.
Well, this is how you're eligible.
This is how you get eligible to win
There
this.
we go.
Yeah,
This
sorry.
doesn't guarantee you get it.
No, you share the live event.
Share it
That's
right now.
that's an entry.
Boop, share.
If you write us a review on iTunes,
Ooh.
you get an entry for every star you give us.
Yeah.
Even if you give us 1 star, you get an entry.
There we go.
And then if you share the repost of the edited version of today, entry. We'll give it away next week.
Next week.
All right.
That's a great value too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what? Cheapest you said?
Cheapest is like 65 or $75.
But then goes up from there.
I
Take
mean,
advantage of it.
you get a long bike.
Mhm.
And there's free beer afterwards, always.
It's like you're being paid to go
It
do
really
this event.
is. You're getting
Man,
paid to
no excuse.
Yeah.
Not to get all share happy right now.
All right, so before we get on to bike fitting, first and foremost, shout outs.
Love shout out time.
Shout outs. I'm just going to lead off. I think we got a pretty much off-road pack today, all mountain bike shout outs. Dan Applegate went out to Ouachita Challenge and
Brad Harriman.
Kind
of combine them here.
Yeah, had it's a challenging day.
It's hard.
They don't call it the Ouachita Challenge for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But he cracked 15 minutes off his previous time. So
Yep. And
decent day.
Brad knocked off 34 minutes off his previous time. So
That's a good day.
solid
Improvement.
stuff. What's even more impressive, though, we were chatting about both of them, is they aren't people who are, this is a long event. I mean, you are on your bike for a long time for this.
58 miles or something.
Yeah.
6,000.
Yeah, it's a tough day.
Yeah.
And both of them were doing it on limited training time.
Yeah.
It's not like they were putting in 15-hour weeks.
It's hard to they're getting better and had better times than previous, but yeah, I'd say neither of them had like an ideal run-in. You know, we ran into things like work and spring break came along, and Dan specifically got sick for a week, and so those things came along. They did the best they could with the work time they had and got the quality in, and they both did better than previous.
Exactly. So. Yeah. No, that was awesome. And the other two, we had Hart Robinson and David Collins, both headed over to Middle Tennessee, and they doubled up. So this was like on the back end of a big training block for both of them, and we wanted to cap it with a race day, just because you push yourself, which is a good training tip for a lot of people. Not every race you go to has to be peak form for you. You can use races where you know you're going to push yourself and dig deep as a way to sort of cap the end of a hard training block, and that's what both of them did. So they had tired legs going in, and Hart managed a third place in the Cat 1 Open Pro division behind two pros that he said were super fast, and then he was first in the single speed, so they doubled up, and David Collins was third respectively. So a great cap to a training block, and great results.
Somebody's saying that we don't have audio.
No audio.
We're good? Okay. We're good.
Someone else give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Yeah, if we're having audio problems, let us know, and we'll get it fixed before we move on. But
we'll keep going for now.
We'll keep moving. So yeah, I mean, both great performances, and that's a big thing is sometimes using races, just capping off a big block. That's accumulated, especially if you're going for longer distance events, which is obviously kind of the popular thing to do these days. That's how you accumulate fatigue, and that's how you simulate one big day is doing a pretty big day on super tired legs.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to it. Bike fitting.
Bike fit time. So first off, let's talk a little bit just kind of on the philosophy. So essentially, bike fitting is going to come even before you hop on the bike. So when you're taking someone through a bike fit, first thing they do when they walk through the door, you don't throw them on the bike and start measuring things and making adjustments. Instead, kind of just run through the philosophy we have and kind of what you do at the start of a bike fit before we dive into issues that are found.
Yeah, I think
bike fitting.
I've got a bit of a different philosophy than a lot of bike fitters out there. Just having such a biomechanics and physiology background, I am not one to accommodate like poor strength, structure, anything that can be fixed with strength, flexibility, or proper mechanics. I'm not going to accommodate that in the fit, but I am going to send that athlete out the door with a plan to improve themselves, which in turn is going to improve the overall position on the bike. And in the long term, that's going to benefit them more than me accommodating something they have going on right now. And, then the position is not right for them 6 months down the road if they actually work on that.
Exactly.
That thing.
They improve the weakness. Yeah. Instead of accommodating a weakness and allowing it to remain, address the weakness, identify the weakness, address it, and then leave the athlete with a way to actually fix that.
Yeah.
And
So when somebody comes through the door, the first thing we do is do some basic movements and check flexibility in specific areas. I like to check obviously hamstrings and lower back, and then I also check rotational flexibility quite a bit because it can cause legs to extend further or not as far as others. So when you're measuring leg extension angles and stuff, like trying to get the seat height right, you can get vastly different numbers on right and left side, and it could just be because one side of their pelvis or their back is tighter than the other, and it's not allowing that leg to move the same as the other one. But that's not a thing you accommodate. Like that's where you say, okay, we found this. Here's how you're going to fix it. Like you fix it. It's going to take you doing a little extra work, but in the long run, you're going to be happier. You're going to be more comfortable on your bike, and you're going to perform better on this bike because you fixed it.
Exactly.
So we'll go through the movement assessments, and then obviously we start working on the cleats before you even get on the bike. We start working cleat position, and then I'll get them on the bike and let them warm up.
Because I think that's a really big thing. This is not a static fit.
No.
It's not like hop on your bike, we're going to put your leg at what we view as the perfect
angle. We're not going to break out protractors.
To get you there. Yeah. Instead,
we get you moving, get the camera set up, get the lights blaring on you so that we have good image.
Get the music going.
Yeah,
so the ambiance is right.
Get the Rocky soundtrack in the background.
Perfect.
Get old Tour de France videos on TV, get you pumped up. That's not true, but just get your legs warmed up first, because we do hard efforts during the fit. And whenever I am looking at leg extension angles and pedal stroke timing and stuff like that, it's always done during the hard effort. Exactly. That's where we want to be the most efficient, where you're having to put out a lot of power, a lot of force to the pedal. That's where we want to be the most efficient. The other times, it's going to be comfortable, but if you want to perform on the bike, you don't want the mechanical breakdown to happen when you're putting the most power to the pedal.
Exactly.
So you won't see that in a static fit. You'll never see that in a static fit. And you're a lot of times in a static fit, you're simulating body positions that aren't natural to you, and aren't natural to how you pedal. So, we'll get you moving. We'll take some images with the camera, and we'll go from there, pretty much.
Cool. So I think one thing that a lot of people, especially if you're new to riding, you don't really realize how big of a difference a couple millimeters can be. I mean, just small little tweaks as Coach Dale's kind of diving through a lot of these troubleshooting things and issues that he sees when he's fitting people. There's a lot of times where you can make just a tiny tweak of maybe nose height on the saddle, or fore aft, or handlebar rotation. Just small little things can add up to big time differences in comfort and body position and overall power transfer. Yeah. So getting it dialed in is huge.
Bike fitting is a game of millimeters. In a lot of cases with some of these issues that we're going to talk about, it's a game of centimeters because it turns into big adjustments. But yeah, you're right. Like, the thing to keep in mind though is that anytime you change one thing about a saddle, it can affect four other, angles or body parts or muscles being active or inactive. So you have to make small changes and let your body adjust to them before you get, all bent out of shape saying, oh, that didn't work. Now I'm going to change this again, one ride later. You have to be patient and let those things, let the changes, do their job and get your body adjusted to them. Otherwise, you just have to be patient.
Exactly.
It's huge.
Well, and also know that the bike fit you're in now, or maybe you've had a bike fit in the past that felt good, that your bike fit can change as you adapt and adjust, like you were just talking about. It may be that 6 months down the road, you've adapted to this position, and if getting into a more aero position is something you're trying to do, don't go all the way to the position you want to be in at the start, but know that your body's going to evolve, it's going to change, and having tweaks made to your bike and getting refit is actually a thing that can be very important.
Absolutely. Muscles fire on a curve. The more stretched or contracted they are, the less force they put out. So if your flexibility improves and you're trying to get into a more aggressive position, as your flexibility improves, you can get closer to that more aggressive position. But it does you no good if you have horrible hamstring flexibility, and this is a rant I'll go on later, but to get yourself in a super aggressive position, because your muscles just are not going to fire efficiently and produce a lot of force because it's afraid of tearing itself.
Yeah.
So that's for a little bit
We'll get
down the
into
road. But the other thing that I like to focus on is making sure that muscles that aren't producing force to the pedal are relaxed. The muscular system is there to not only assist in movement, but it's also there to resist movement. Mm-hmm. And so if certain muscles are not active, or they're if they're stretched versus contracted, or like one muscle is kind of compensating for another, like those things show up in your body position pretty easily. And if there's tension in the upper body that just doesn't need to be there, it's taking away from activity and energy that can be put to the lower body. So I think a lot of people ignore the like what's happening. Like everybody goes for like angles. Like is this angle right? Like, but like, well, by the recommendations, the angle might be right, but you're like your shoulders are all rounded out and you're shrugged, so you don't look comfortable at all.
Exactly.
So let's fix that first,
Look
and
at
then
the
we can
whole
try to
system.
get the angles right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's jump in.
All right, let's dive right into it.
Number one, we're leading off with the number one.
Should I drum roll every time?
Oh no.
Let us know. Let us know if you like the drum roll.
Number one.
Number one.
Saddle too high.
Yeah.
80%, maybe 90% of the people that I fit, saddles too high. And a lot of that comes from either, say, being statically fit. That is part of it sometimes, but just not knowing. Like, it's easier to feel the saddle being too low, but also people see pros with the saddle like up here and the bars down here, having this massive bar drop, and they're like, well, that's what I got to do. That's what it's supposed to look like. That's what the bike is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And they're pros for a reason.
Mm-hmm. And they're on frame sizes that are super small,
right,
relative to their body size.
Exactly.
So that drop that they're getting, it looks like their saddle's super high, but it's more so because there's a lot more saddle post coming out because they're on a smaller frame with a really long stem.
Right. And so when your saddle's like super high, that's like main things, saddle sores. Yep. Any type of a lot of saddle discomfort can be taken away by lowering the saddle. The big thing, your leg has to extend so far you end up rocking over the side of the saddle. That's kind of the big and that one, that's where the saddle sores come in. Mm-hmm. When you push hard, your body's going to naturally force your heel down. And so if you set a seat height with your heel up here, your knees bent more. So if you're just going for angles, you can get that perfect angle, quote unquote, my air quotes here if you're listening. Yep. You can get those perfect angles and your heel's too high. And so now when you actually want to drop your heel and your leg extends further, you either end up finishing the bottom of the pedal stroke with your calf, pointing your toes, yep, or you rock over the side of the saddle to try to extend your leg farther, and then you get saddle sores. So saddle too high, huge.
And not only that, once you're in that overly stretched position, you're no longer producing force. So when that leg angle gets too great, too straightened out, you're no longer able to generate the force that you could by having that lower saddle height.
So if you're trying to set your own saddle height, try to set it, like if you have a video opportunity, try to set it while you're going hard. The other means, like if you're just trying to ballpark it, you can actually like unclip, put your heel on the pedal and extend your leg fully. So heel on the pedal, extend your leg fully, and then kind of set the saddle height that way. And then when you clip back in, there's a little bit of bend in your knee. Mm-hmm. That's a starting point at least. But if you can't get your heel on the pedal,
what would you say is a bigger either performance or risk for injury? Saddle too high or saddle too low? If someone were to be setting it in a ballpark, should they err on the high side or low side?
I mean, it's a tough one because
one can cause knee.
Can cause, saddle too low, you'll get knee problems. Saddle too high is like more problems, like varied problems. If you have knee problems, like if you were prone to knee issues, I would say err on the side of a little bit high.
Yeah.
But low, erring on the side of low, you just get so much more like glute activation out of a lower saddle height, and those muscles are strong, very fatigue resistant. And if you're underutilizing them, you're missing out like big time. So unless you have knee problems, I'd probably err on the side of just a smidge low. I mean, we're talking like error, meaning like a couple mils up or down. Like, I'd probably err on the side of low, but.
Okay. All right. Anything else to add to that one?
No, let's move on.
Moving on to number 2, cleat too far forward.
Yeah, I think most people, when they get new shoes, even if the shop is like putting them on for them, they kind of just get slapped on there and tightened down just to make sure that they're not going to fall off the shoe. And there's not a lot of attention paid to where the cleat position is. Or sometimes they'll do the old, like where's your metatarsal, like the side of your foot, the bony part inside of your foot, and they'll set it. But a lot of people will set it based on the metatarsal near the big toe. And what I found is if you set it based on that, it's generally too far forward. Because once you get the pressure of the pedal toward the front of that pad of your foot, I didn't wear shoes today, or socks. So if you can see this, if you get toward the front of the pad of your foot, the pressure here, when you pressure that, your toes tend to curl. And once your toes curl, the next thing, calf, boom. So you get toes curling in your shoe, your calf contracts, and now you're overusing your calf.
Yeah. And quad tends to follow.
Yep.
So anyone dealing with knee issues as well, I mean, that could be
absolutely cleat position
as well. Overuse of the tops of your legs.
Yep.
Pulling on those knees. Part of that could be cleat position.
Yep.
Saddle height, cleat position.
So what I tend to do is like what I recommend is unless you're like a dedicated sprinter or a climber that climbs out of the saddle a lot, my recommendation is to slam that cleat back all the way back and move it from there. Like start all the way back and then, figure it out from there. If you feel like you're getting too much glute activation, you don't feel like you're using your quads much or whatever. Mm-hmm. As far as like side to side movement, you can start it in the middle. I usually start it wider for guys. Like if you're a male, I usually start wider foot position, so the cleat toward the inside of the foot. It moves the shoe out. Ladies, I tend to center it up. It just depends. And then once you see what your knees do, you can move them in and out to better align.
And pedaling. Yep.
But most of the time, my starting point for any cleat is back and pretty wide foot stance position, so cleat toward the inside. But if your cleat's too far forward, you're going to overuse your calves and indirectly going to affect your quad usage. Mm-hmm. It's thinking about, like, I always like ladies wearing high heels. They're always toe down, and that's kind of what happens when that cleat position's forward. That pressure comes, toes curl, heel lifts up,
and the glutes don't want to fire.
Don't want to fire at all.
Yeah.
So,
and you need the glutes.
They're important.
Use them glutes.
They're important.
You got to have those firing. We talk about all this stuff quite a bit in the House of Pain from a pedal stroke standpoint, relaxing toes, dropping heels. But a side product of that is, how are you actually positioned on your bike? Can you drop your heel, or is the saddle too high?
Yeah.
Are you naturally wanting to curl your toes and contract that calf? Well, that could be cleat.
Could be part of it.
All right.
If you have questions, if you're on live and you have questions, put them down there, and we'll answer them at the end here.
Yep.
We got a few already.
We got no questions yet on the live feed.
Okay.
However,
so the next thing that I see quite a bit is just the bike being too big or the wrong size in general.
Yeah.
And
that was me. My first bike ever.
Yeah.
So I ride a 58 now, and I was on a 62.
That's pretty big.
62 for
that's
my first one.
That's pretty big. And that's not like, sometimes people are like in between sizes, and it's really hard put them on the perfect size. If you're one of those people that's like just disproportionate in your like inseam versus your torso length, like those are hard people to fit on bikes and to just in choosing the size of the bike. But a lot of times what might happen is you buy a used bike because it's cheap.
Yep.
Or, sometimes I don't know any shops that do this, but sometimes, the shop wants to sell what's on the floor and they might recommend a size that, may not be the best for you. But, you get in, and if a bike's too big, it gets increasingly harder to get the reach of the bike, at a proper level without putting a really short stem on it.
Yeah.
And then, like, if the bike's too big, like, especially for, like, time trial bikes and triathlon bikes, if the bike's too big, it becomes increasingly harder to get the drop that you want as far as, aero position goes.
Bringing your upper body lower.
Yeah. It's just difficult. So, I mean, I would say just make sure, like, especially if you're going to go spend thousands of bucks on a new bike, that you're getting the right size.
Yeah.
And
you've helped people quite a bit in that regard
as
well.
Yeah.
Especially people who you fit before that their size.
Yeah.
That you can say, hey, what are you deciding between? I'd go with this.
Yeah.
Now, if you have, so just really quick, this wasn't a question someone asked, but I'm sure, a question that's been asked before. Say someone does have unnatural proportions. Someone really long legs, shorter torso, from a frame size, should they, say they're in between, should they go smaller frame, bigger frame?
I usually go smaller.
Smaller frame, and then vice versa, someone longer torso, shorter legs?
Depends on their goal. Like, if you got long legs, short torso, I always say go shorter, smaller frame. If you're short leg, long torso, that's the harder one, the harder combo. And on that one, it just depends on your goal. If you're like very endurance rider or long course triathlete or something like that, I think it's totally fine to go with the bigger size. Because if you get the smaller size and your torso is that much longer and you have to put like a really long stem on the bike, the handling of the bike is way different. It's touchier, it's twitchier. Like for somebody doing like crit racing where there's a lot of like technical corners and stuff like that, it's a little bit harder to hold a line with a really long stem. You think about like a downhill mountain biker who has to like maneuver like crazy fast corners and stuff like that. Their stems are always like, it's like a block. It's right on the steerer tube. The further the bars get away from that steerer tube, there's more, that lever arm is longer, and so it's a little bit harder to hold and keep the reactions from the front tire down. So if you're longer torso, I say if you're going for endurance and comfort, you can go with a bigger frame. But if you want to be aggressive, you're going to have to go with a shorter frame and deal with a longer stem.
And I think you mentioned a big thing here, which is also part of the bike fitting process, is goals. So what are your actual goals moving forward? Are you someone that's going to be doing 200-mile rides, or are you someone who's going to be racing crits? The fit that you're going to put a person in is going to be a little different depending on whether it's more comfort based versus more.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that I've fit rolling around that like they come in and they're doing a 70.3 or a full Ironman or something like that, and I fit them for that. So it's not super aggressive.
5+ hours in the saddle. And
so they go out on their group ride with their buddies and they're like, God, why did it? That is not aero at all. Like, why are you look like you're sitting in a lazy boy, like, but you don't know the full story behind the person. You don't know that they have really poor hamstring flexibility and they're doing long course triathlon. So until if a person's been fit by a professional fitter, until you know the full story, like you can't really make a judgment call on and put your 2 cents in on, the person's position until like
exactly. All right, moving on. We got more to get through here.
Yeah,
Let's speed this up.
All right, so one of the big thing I see is bikes. This is just bikes in general. The geometry is too aggressive. So like,
and that's a thing that you've been talking a lot about with the new super time trial / triathlon bikes.
All these super bikes,
integrated.
All these
stuff
super
on the front
bikes
end.
are super difficult to manipulate the front end, and they're super aggressive geometry. But they say they're building them for triathletes, but the bulk of triathletes are actually doing long course, and it's really hard to get a person comfortable for hours and hours and hours on these bikes because the front end, there's just not enough like lift in the front end, and then you're resorting to like putting like 90 millimeters of stack underneath the pads, and then the
or being forced to move to a bigger frame size,
right,
and then trying to
right. So it's like a lot of these bikes are developed for pros and with pros who can handle very aggressive positions, but they're also not on a bike for 5+ hours, in that position.
getting used to having plenty of time to adapt to that position.
So I just would be, if you're going to buy one of these super bikes, like make sure on the front end you have a way to get that bike less aggressive from the get-go. I mean, figure out if they have optional like stacks to put under the pads. Like that's the popular thing now. You see like even the pros, like their bars are in line with the top tube, but they have like 5 inches of stack underneath the pads, which is, still getting them flat, but the bike's so small that, they're just putting tons and tons of stack to get them into a good position. And that's something I've had to resort to with a bunch of people who are doing long course on very aggressive time trial bikes, is just stacking the pads like crazy. So that's another big one. So just watch out. If you're buying a super bike, just make sure there's options to get the front end up.
Yeah. All right, the next one, moving on,
huge,
is the saddle improperly leveled.
Yeah.
And I actually, sometimes you go out and ride, you have it set right, and you can go out and ride and hit a bump, and you don't even realize it's adjusted your seat height. I recently had where I didn't realize my saddle had tilted down slightly over the course of a ride, and started noticing so much pressure on my hands, like I was just overweighting my hands, and I dealt with it for 2 rides and got home and was like, I got to check this. And sure enough, it was very tiny adjustment on the nose of the saddle. Moving it up, went out and cruised again. I was like, oh my gosh, so much better.
Night and day.
Yeah, it's so much different.
I always tell it's the most fickle setting on a bike, like the nose tilt, the saddle tilt. It can, like 1 millimeter can make a huge difference with saddle pressure, hand pressure, lower back tightness, all that kind of stuff. But what a lot of people end up doing is they take a saddle, they plop a level on top of it, and they just level it like that. The problem with is saddles aren't
they're on an uphill.
Yeah. Problem is saddles aren't meant to be leveled like that, and there's features in a saddle that are meant to help cue your pelvis over. That little flip that happens on the back of a lot of saddles, that's there so when you scoot back too far or you get away from like the sweet spot of the saddle, it's there to like cue you to roll your pelvis forward. But a lot of people end up leveling that thing out. So there's like this dip in the middle of the saddle, and then the nose is up and the back is like level. And that's the worst, because when you go to the front of the saddle or you get in an aggressive position, the amount of pressure that's going to come off that nose is numbing.
Got a story about that.
Yeah.
I got a different story about that one.
Yeah, another day.
People want story time. I'll dive into that later.
Yeah. So what you need to do, like to properly level a saddle, you find the sweet spot of the saddle. It may be like even like a 2-inch spot on the saddle.
Sweet spot meaning
like the spot where you sit the most.
Where sit bones
are
going to be.
If you're on a more upright position bike, it's going to be further back on the saddle. If you're on like a time trial saddle or a split nose saddle, it's going to be closer to the front because you're actually going to be on your pubic bones more so than your sit bones. So you find that sweet spot where you spend the most time and you level that spot. you level the 2-inch spot on the saddle, and then if you get pressure off that, you tilt it down just a smidge. But you find that spot and you level it. Don't pay attention to any other feature of the saddle. They're supposed to be there, but level the little sweet spot. It'll make all the difference in the world.
And as far as, I just talked about, like on my ride that I was doing, feeling that pressure on my hands that wasn't there. For me, it was nose down. Is that something you typically find? Nose down forces you to kind of slide off, fall forward.
Too far down.
Or if you're constantly feeling like you're needing to push yourself back.
Yep.
Slide back on the saddle like you're falling off the front a little bit.
Nose down, a lot of pressure on the hands. So you may either feel like you're sliding or you may feel like you're pushing away from the bars. If you have very little weight on your hands, or if you're getting lower back issues or tons of saddle nose pressure, the saddle's probably too far up.
Yeah.
But if you realize you have a ton of hand pressure, or if you're one of those people that constantly is looks like you're pushing away from your bars and your shoulders are all rounded out, there's a chance either the saddle's too tilted downward or the bars are just needing some tweaks. So,
all right, moving on. Overuse of the KOPS, knee over pedal spindle.
Yeah,
COPS.
It's like one of those things where you're
gonna do?
You are people put out these like recommendations, and they're all good, but it's not good for everybody. So knee over pedal spindle, or COPS, is like probably the most common thing you'll see. Like if somebody comes in and I know they've been fit previously, 95% of the time they're going to be knee over pedal.
Dead on.
But the problem with that is that not everybody's femurs and tibias, the upper leg and lower leg, are the same length. And so it messes with the timing through the bottom of the pedal stroke. So instead of paying a ton of attention to knee over pedal or to knee position, I do check it, but I first try to get the point where your hamstring kicks in, and you see all this on video, slow-mo video. The point where your hamstring kicks in, I try to get that as close to 6 o'clock as possible. And the reason for that is if the crank arm is in front of 6, like 5 o'clock, and you start to pull back with your hamstring, because that's the movement the hamstring does, when you pull back with the hamstring, you're actually pulling against that crank arm, and you're doing very little good to pull against a rigid object. So it's once you get down to 6, if you pull straight back there, now you're pulling with that circle, and you're actually producing force that's going to help, generate power. So I'll find that point first, and then I'll check the knee position. And sometimes it's a little bit in front, and sometimes it's a little bit behind. And it also varies based on the bike and the style of rider. Like time trial position, a lot of times is pretty far forward in front of the knee over pedal. If you take that as like the standard, the gold standard. Time trialists are always in front. Triathletes almost always in front. Now you don't want to get too close like to the toe. Like if you get out, if your knee's over your toe, you're asking for knee problems. But like mountain bikers and even some of the gravel bikes and stuff like that I've fit, you'll end up maybe even slightly behind that pedal spindle. And it's just part of the geometry of the bike, but also, moving you back that far helps utilize a little bit more glute and on like long sustained climbs or something like that where you're upright for a long period of time. So just know like that's a good place to start, knee over pedal. But if your timing of the bottom of the pedal stroke at 6 o'clock point is off, you're losing some efficiency there. So that's my spiel on COPS.
No, it makes a ton
I love
sense.
COPS. Don't get me wrong.
Bad boy, bad boy.
We should have queued that up.
Keep doing it. We got a couple questions that we'll dive into just really quick. Stacy, she was at our speed workshop on Saturday. A runner who's just getting into bikes that they want to use for cross training, where would you direct them as a brand new person?
To get into bikes?
Yeah, just to snag a bike. I would listen to this in its entirety. And then local bike shop, is going to be kind of your best bet. Talk through your goals with them. more of an entry-level bike if it's just going to be used for cross-training.
Yeah, and just make sure they go through a basic protocol to size you on the bike. You know, if they just look at you and you say, oh yeah, you're about this size, just question them. I mean, they should be willing to help. They should have the knowledge to help you size the bike properly. But if they don't like go through any process to try to get you on the right size, then just question them. And
yeah. All right, we got another one. We'll Chris, we see your question. We'll dive into that one here in a second.
All right, so one of the other main things that I see more these days, I've just kind of noticed this trend, and I've just had to fix it a lot lately. So, is bars too high? I mean, everybody, like, we get a lot of endurance riders and people that do a lot of century rides and even like ultra endurance riding and stuff like that. And the mindset there is that the more upright the bike can be, the more comfortable it's going to be for hours on end. But two major problems come with really high bars. When those bars get really high, one, you start to dump your hips backwards. And it's like if you're sitting in a chair, right, you're not sitting on your pubic bones at all. Your pelvis is rolled under you, and you're called slump, especially in this couch. You're like,
right now, I got no sit bone contact.
No,
now.
Yeah, I'm like basically on my
low back.
I'm on my coccyx right now. But yeah, the higher the bars go, the more you tend to dump your hips backwards, and that can really shut off glutes and hamstrings, but also put a lot of pressure in your lower back. The other big thing that I've been seeing with bars too high is you start to shrug. So like the way I explain it is, if you walk up to a bar, right, you're not going to put your hands up on the bar by dropping your elbows and putting your hands up there. You're going to shrug your shoulders, and you're going to put your whole arm up on that bar. So that's like, whenever your bars are too high, you adjust that height, not by like lifting your hands up, but by shrugging to get your hands to the level that you want, so your wrists are in alignment. So a lot of times what happens is that you put the bar so high, and you may have good arm angles. You have the perfect arm angles.
Elbow,
elbow angle. But you're like this. You're just shrugged. Your arms are either shrugged up, or your front of your shoulders protruding forward, because you're trying to manipulate your hand height.
And this may tie into the question that Chris was going to ask, which is why I was saving it for now. Why would my arms feel comfortable when I'm outdoors, but on the trainer I always feel like I'm reaching, shoulders rounded out?
So why you feel comfortable outside, but a lot of like the trainer is a weird thing, because the bike doesn't move under you quite as much. So even just that more static position in general produces weird results.
Where you're trying to support yourself on a trainer versus outdoors.
But a lot of people don't realize that when they're on their trainer, they don't even keep their hands in the same spot on the bike. So, the hand position could be different. It could be the level of the saddle. Yeah. So or the level of the bike itself. So if,
most of those wheel blocks are not level with your rear tire.
Exactly.
So it's putting your
front
tire up, which is kind of bringing your
you could be sliding back on the saddle, and it's increasing the reach of the bike, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, the level of the bike indoors plays a big role of it. That could be it.
One thing I've noticed as far as bars too high is when working with people outdoors on out of the saddle riding mechanics, when bars are too high as well, it's been tough for them to get their weight over the front of their bike, because there's no room to go. Or they're really having to bend, and it's more like a sprint mechanic, so comfort out of the saddle can be an issue.
Absolutely.
With bars too high.
Yep, I've seen that as well.
All right, moving on to the next one.
All right.
We just went from bars too high.
Yeah, this is another one. This is, we kind of already touched on this a little bit with the aggressive geometries, but aero pads being too low. And so what happens when the aero pads are too low is you end up reaching for the pad with your forearm instead of actually like getting your chest lower. So I've seen people like I call it the towel test. You roll a towel up, and it lifts them up by like 3 inches. And they put you put the towel under their forearms, and the chest height doesn't...
While resting on their pads.
Yeah, and their chest height doesn't change. The torso angle does not change at all, but all that happened was they retracted their shoulders. So
allowed their chest to relax.
Allowed them to relax the upper body. Yeah. So, like, just because your aero pads are low doesn't mean you're in a great aero position. There's a good chance if you don't, and this is part of it, if you don't have the strength to hold that position, then you're just going to end up, your body doesn't like that discomfort, and it's going to push you away from the pads to get your chest higher to make everything else happy. So just watch out for your shoulders rounding out when you're setting your aero pad height. Try to get the shoulder blades to sit back and relax and retract a little bit. That's my 2 cents.
There we go. And that's all you got is 2. So we can't try to pull another cent out of you on that one.
Nope.
All right, next one. Long-term use of shims. Start with first off talking what a shim is for someone who's not familiar with it, and then why that can be an issue to constantly use it.
A shim is something that a lot of fitters will put in a shoe under the cleat generally that either increases basically it's millimeters, increases the length of that 1 foot, essentially, that one leg.
So the height of
the
pedal, essentially. Pedal height changes.
Or it angles the pedal a little bit. In theory, this helps counteract imbalances in the right and left side.
Leg length discrepancies.
And helps align the knees, like if one knee is coming closer to the top tube or not. Again, this is like a pet peeve of mine. I think I've left in the 300 plus bikes that I've fit over the last several years, I've probably left shims in people's shoes twice, maybe. But even still, I'll generally take them out and just see what happens without them. And if something's blaring, I'm going to leave them I'm going to reassess their strength in specific muscles, laterally especially, and then leave them with basically a physical therapy plan to get those muscles back activated so those knees will realign themselves naturally. Because in the long term, that's going to help the rider more than anything. You put a shim in there and you just leave it there for years, and it's just a crutch to help realign the knee, but the muscles are still inactive and they're not helping you at all, produce force.
That's the big thing. There's a difference between having actual bone length discrepancies versus discrepancies that have formed due to muscular issues.
Yeah,
so 2 totally different things here.
If you have a leg length, a leg length discrepancy that's been diagnosed by a doctor, that's one thing. I'll leave the shims in. It's got to happen. But
through that initial off the bike assessment, you can
99% of the time it's just because if your legs are different lengths, it's a functional leg length problem because your hips are out of alignment, and that can be fixed with strength, flexibility, and maybe a chiropractor.
And long term, that's going to make you a stronger rider than what leaving a shim in would.
So what I do is if people need knee alignment or something like that, I'll give them the strength plan, this, that, and the other, but I'll suggest a little bit extra arch support, or they do have shims that you can actually put in the shoe underneath the midsole to kind of just cue that foot out just a little bit, and give them the strength program so that in 6 months or 3 months, 6 months, whatever, take the shim out, get rid of it. But I don't want them to have to pull the cleat apart
and start messing around with that whole system.
To take the shim out later. Yeah. So I'm not a huge proponent of shims in general, because I just feel like it's a crutch. Unless you have a degenerative problem or something that's been diagnosed by a doctor, I don't really like accommodating that kind of thing. I don't think it's the best for the rider.
Good. No, that's a good one. All right, the last one.
Whew.
Unless more questions.
This could take a while.
Wanting to be aggressive, so a very aero, slam that stem. No wind's ever going to touch your chest, but not having the flexibility or strength to support that position.
Yeah. Over the years, I've had a couple people that just demand a a very aggressive position, and they have it in their head what that looks like, and it's generally what a pro's bike would look like. And when you assess them on the front end, they've got horrible hamstring and back and everything, flexibility, can barely get past their knee, and they're super weak in their core and posterior chain muscles. Everything's just weak. So they're in no way, shape, or form prepared to hold an aggressive position. But they just have it set in their head that that's what they have to do to get faster on a bike.
Yeah, and if you try to get into too aggressive of a position, but your body can't handle that, you're going to be compensated. You're not going to be producing the power that you should be, because muscles are either going to have to turn off, you're going to have to really hunch your low back and shut your glutes off in order to try to drop your chest to that position. You're not going to be able to roll forward like you would need to, because that's just way too much stretch through your hamstrings, which are only capable of stretching to the point that they have that flexibility. So it does you no real good. We always say there's, when you're trying to go as fast as you can, if that's your goal, aero is one thing and power is the other component, right? So you got to overcome the wind resistance and you got to be pushing power to the pedals. It does you want to find the sweet spot between the two, essentially, right? You want to be in the spot where you're as aero as you can be while producing the best power to minimize time and maximize speed. But if you sacrifice power generation just to get lower, that's great if you're on a downhill and not having to pedal hard. But when you're trying to produce power or needing to produce power, that can be a bad thing.
If you can average over 30 miles an hour for 3+ miles, let's talk. Let's see if we can get you super aero. But if you can do that, you probably have the strength and flexibility to withstand an aggressive position. So,
and here's the thing: if that's your goal and you've got big goals, we're not against you getting there.
Nope.
But you just need to know it's going to be a process. So you aren't going to be taken into a 5-inch lower slam stem position day one. It's going to be spend 3 months here, do your strength work flexibility. We're going to put you in a position you need to adapt to that, and then from there, adapt again. From there, adapt again. Going too crazy with something like that will be a recipe for disaster.
I can't tell you how many times I've actually made people less aggressive and they've gotten faster. Scott Newberry is a good example. Multi-time Tennessee State time trial champion, and he got a new bike and copied the position off. It was pretty much the same bike, but copied the new position and just kind of didn't really feel great on it. And then by the measurements, I brought him up a little bit in the front, and he hit new fastest time, So it's just not. It's not all about aero, especially at the amateur level. It's not all about aero. So I'll jump off my soapbox now.
If your body can't handle it,
right?
And for most of you, we've complained a lot before about endurance athletes not doing their strength work and not doing their stretching, right? And as coaches, it's the two things we have the hardest time getting people to do is their strength work and their post-activity stretching. But those are two things that are going to allow you to get into an aerodynamic, super aero position and produce great force. So if that's your goal, you need to be putting in the work on the stuff that you may not like doing nearly as much. We've had
questions. Give me some questions
come in. They were both the same. So how much is a bike fit from BPC?
Well, I would say
we just dropped the price from $1 million down to
just for the. I would say go check out bpc.setmore.com. Setmore. BPC. We'll put it in the comments. You can book fits on that site, and that way I don't put out a price that 5 years down the road people try to hold me to. But bpc.setmore.com, that will you can go check out the pricing and book one.
I just put that in the comments. And then we had a question.
Yeah, I know. We had one from Debbie.
Going to find it. Crank arm length, Debbie.
Yep.
Crank arm length. How does changing to a longer or shorter one affect your fitting, i.e. saddle up or down? Can a fitting help you determine which length you should use?
Yeah, crank arm length is
it's a big area of
constant
discussion.
it's a constant discussion, and
you've experimented with it.
I have. I've gone longer, shorter, like real short. So like the big thing that I found with crank arm length, as far as the fitting goes, obviously, like going shorter, there's always a balance because you have a top and a bottom of the pedal stroke. So if you go longer at the top, knee angle gets smaller. At the bottom, you have to actually extend the leg further. If you go really short, knee angle opens up over the top, but now you don't get so much extension through the bottom. So there's a balance with either one of them. They're not necessarily better or worse. What I've found with crank arm length is if you are like getting into an aggressive position on a time trial bike, so for some people, shorter crank arms helps get over the top of the pedal stroke. And I had a lady come in even last week or 2 weeks ago that I told her, I was like, you're better off getting some shorter crank arms. And she had like 170s, but she was like short leg, long torso. So it was hard to get her knee angle over the top was just kind of approaching that too small. And so we were kind of fighting with the saddle height a little bit. But if you go shorter crank arms, knee angle opens up over the top. It's good for some people, especially more aggressive positions. Longer crank arms, obviously over the top, knee angle gets smaller, and you have to extend further. So that's a lot of times that's a problem, trying to go too long. What I do is because of my road bike is more upright than a time trial bike, I ride longer crank arms on my road bike because I feel like I can generate a lot of force with the longer crank arms, and then I ride just a normal average, like 172.5 on my time trial bike, just to be able to get over the top a little bit more. I've gone as low as 160 or 165 on the time trial bike, and while I could get in a more aggressive position, I just didn't feel like I could generate the same amount of force. I'm a high force person, whether it's low cadence or high cadence, and like when I don't feel like I can do that, I don't like it. So
on your road bike, you're 175s.
Road bike, I rode 175s.
Small drop to 172.5s.
Yep.
If you're someone who has no idea what length your crank arms are, usually it's stamped on the inside of your crank arm, which is what you're kind of where the pedal attaches to. You should see it stamped on there, so you have an idea.
So all that to say, it depends. Like what crank arm length you should be just depends, but it does affect the fit.
Exactly, and getting fit can be very valuable in trying to figure that out.
Yeah, we can definitely tell you. You know, one thing we always do is like we give everybody 30 days to feel out the fit on the road. You know, get at least 8 to 10 rides on the bike, and if something's not jiving, we bring you back in and tweak it, because fitting indoors on a trainer not moving is an imperfect system.
Yep.
So like you get to ride it out on the road and come back in, but sometimes we'll have, like I had a guy last week who because I don't have a bunch of stuff to sell you. I just fit bikes. Like, so if we run into a problem where we don't have a part that we need, then we get you to buy it, and then we book you to come back in to finish things up. So, you know, if you happen to come in and need shorter crank arms, or it's a suggested thing, then you'll just go get a new crank and you'll come back in later to finish up.
And there are, just as far as more specifically to our fitting process, you do have stems of different sizes and angles that you will use.
I've got things to try
to test out
to see if it's gonna work. And then generally I'll say, you know, just get this same spec and then give me that stem back.
Yeah.
So
I actually will let the bike fit in the proper position. Yeah. You can go ride it. You can mess with it while you get a new stem, and then
I don't
swap it
normally,
back
I don't get a lot of stems back, but
Don't start tracking those things.
yeah, I don't even track a $10
So
stem.
what I just got out of this was if you want a free stem,
yeah.
it's included.
Yeah,
in the
if you
bike
want, yeah, we just need to start including the stem price in the fits.
fit. Other questions? Does anyone have any?
We did have a question. I know Logan asked about fitting a mountain bike, and the answer to that question is yes, we can fit mountain bikes. It gets trickier as the tires get bigger. Basically, just a standard like 29er 2.2. Those will generally fit on a trainer. Sometimes we have to deflate some of the air out of the tires, but if you get much beyond that, it gets more difficult to do, and deflating the tires doesn't always, we can't put as much pressure on the pedals. So like if you have a mountain bike and you have a direct drive trainer, you can always bring in your direct drive trainer, and we can fit you that way as well.
Cool. Everyone, last chance. Any other questions? Going once. I guess there is like a 30-second delay.
Yeah, there's a delay, Bryant. So
going once, going twice. You have 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and start closing. And
yeah, so if you have any questions, again, you can always email us, info@buildpeakcompete.com. Like we'll answer questions all day long. Like we'll collect them and answer them on the podcast. So any listener questions, send them in, info @buildpeakcompete.com, and yeah, we'll answer them.
And if
live.
there's other topics you guys want us to cover, if you've made it to the end here,
it gets really tough to keep thinking up stuff every week.
Here's a question: where are we? We are on the couch at BPC Remote World Headquarters in Germantown, Tennessee.
Germantown,
Tennessee is where all the bike fits happen. So if you're wanting to get booked for a bike fit, this is where the spot is. And again, you can go to that bpc.setmore.com, which is in the comments here, in order to select times and see prices and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if you book one, you'll get a follow up pretty quickly about like the location and where like what you need to bring and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
All right. Thank you guys for listening, watching, being a part of our day.
Make sure you go. If you want to win that that free entry, make sure you like, share, give us an iTunes ratings, and you will be entered to win. 5 stars gets 5 entries.
That's right.
Or opportunities.
It's true.
Opportunities to win.
All right, guys.
Crew, that's all we got.
See you guys next week.
Peace.
Adios.